Hi, and welcome to this podcast on cybersecurity. And this is Aniket and Dr. And along with me, I have my co-host, Dr. Byrd. And Dr. Byrd, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Aniket. Hey, I'm excited to be here. You know, talking about cybersecurity is something that we do consistently. And I thought it was an excellent idea to pause for a moment and, put our ideas together in a podcast. We could share some of the conversations that you and I have constantly around the topics of networking and AI and social engineering. I thought it was an excellent idea to start this initiative. So I'm excited.
Yep, same here. Speaking on all of these topics, it always becomes a starting point for a new discussion, for a new topic or a new masterclass, if you say.
Exactly. You know, what fascinates me about cybersecurity and really technology, I refer to it as technology because, cyber is about protecting, informations and systems and resources and people, right? From the dynamic threat landscape, and that is constantly evolving. I pivoted from the term cybersecurity to technology because that's really what we're about. We're about smartphones and tablets and IoT of everything, right?
Right.
Data systems, AI systems, smart cars, and all of that, right? So I don't want to, scope us narrowly. I want to make sure we have our audience thinking, broad and holistic about what it means to be safe and secure online.
Very true. Because a lot of times within organizations, that scope gets defined very, very narrowly. And
of course
they think that, hey, there is a security department with 5 people. There is somebody called a CISO, and it's their responsibility to secure everybody. I'm just going to do my job, and that's about it, right?
That's it. And that's really this misnomer, right? Because we work with the entire organization, right? We work with the HR department, we work with legal, we work with the various business components, depending on which sector we sit in, right? Because they are the users of the technology, right?
Absolutely.
And we need to make sure that the technology functions to service the business purpose, but we need to do so in a safe, secure manner, right? Protect the data, protect the people, protect the resources from the evolving threat landscape. That's really what our job is about.
And in these days, what I have also observed is that a lot of times when there is a merger and acquisition happening, that merger or acquisition ultimately hangs upon what kind of cybersecurity you have in your organization. If a company doesn't have good security practices or they have a history of a breach or getting a ransomware attack, it's a high probability that the deal may not go through because the confidence in that system really shrinks with all these kind of factors.
Exactly. When you talk about merger acquisition, it's about risk, it's about liability, it's about equity, it's about benefit. What does an organization benefit from this merger? And if there's risk and liability, then people will shy away from it. So true, very true.
Yep. Now, before we get started, I would like to have us introduced because I'm sure some of our learners some of our listeners today are hearing us for the first time. So for everyone, hi, my name is Aniket and Dr. and I come with around 19 years of experience in cybersecurity. I have worked with companies like Microsoft, Walmart, and Akamai. And overall, I come with a lot of defensive experience into cybersecurity. One of the most interesting times was when there was an active DDoS attack happening on one of our customers from this hacker group called Anonymous. And they were attacking from more than 50,000 IP addresses. And I was involved in defending that attack. And I'm passionate about cybersecurity, about coaching people, getting into this field and teaching cybersecurity. Dr. Byrd, can you please share your introduction with us? Yes.
Yep. That's great, and that's fascinating. I'm Thomas Byrd. I've got 20 years of experience in law enforcement and corporate America and IT and cybersecurity. I'm excited to be part of this, educational, continuous education in the cyberspace. much like Aniket, I played some offensive and defensive roles in cybersecurity, and I'm really passionate about sharing some of those nuances and best practices with a larger audience. And that's really our goal and objective, not only through the cybersecurity curriculum that we develop, but through our podcast, where we can share some of those conversations that Aniket and I have about best practices.
Absolutely. And one of the first segments that I would like to touch upon is about keeping ourselves updated, because this world is moving so fast, especially with AI. Every day you see some or the other kind of new cyber attack being discovered or being published. So how do we keep ourselves updated as to what cybersecurity is? How do you do it, Dr. Byrd?
Well, I'm constantly reading, right, and educating myself. So not only, are we taking, certificate programs and getting our degrees, but, education is a continuous process, Throughout our curriculum, I share the importance of building a cyber network, right? Within the U.S., we have various ISACs, right? And these were organizations like FSISAC that is part of a financial sector, right? They are InfoGuard groups and ways in which you can connect with not only the local law enforcement, but local business groups to get up to date as what's happening from the threat landscape. I'm also reading periodicals, newspapers, and educating myself on, what's new and emerging. And also, understanding what new technology is and how it works and how it's being used in the business environment. We're talking about different connections, right? And the dependencies that exist. Those are the things that cyber criminals exploit, when they're looking to compromise an organization, right? The people, the resources inside that organization. So continuing education is so important.
True.
And it manifests itself a lot of ways.
And what kind of websites or blogs or books, what do you read?
Well, you and I talk about the IC3, right? And they produce the FBI crime reports. They come out annually, and they give us some of the statistics that's happening globally. So, for example, they talked about some of the impersonation and social engineering. Fraud has gone up like 16% from the previous year. Yeah. And what we mean by social engineering, that is, taking these unsafe actions, right? Now, when we first started in cybersecurity, it was in technology, really, we were talking about emails, right? We would get these spam emails talking about we won the lottery or we had this inheritance, and all we had to do was click a link or provide personal identifying information. None of this was true, right? So this is the cyber criminal. We don't necessarily know who they are or where they are, but they're trying to get us to take this unsafe action. Now we multiply that and amplify that moving forward. Now we have smartphones and tablets and text messages, right? And social media platforms. And these cyber attacks have evolved, exponentially, based on the threat landscape, based on the communication and the technology landscape. A term of art that we use is phishing. Phishing is voice, email
phishing,
voice attack. Exactly. Phishing, right, is the text messages. We get those text messages to click links and pay these bills and all of these things. That's phishing. And of course, phishing is the email, right? And we're familiar with that. And those are cyber criminals trying to get us to take these unsafe actions.
So true. In fact, I remember in 2005, about 20 years ago, I was in college, and back then we didn't have internet access at every home. There used to be something called a cyber cafe, where there would be a bunch of computers plugged into the internet, and at that time, 1 Mbps was like really, really good internet speed. And during that time, I remember going to one of the cyber cafes and receiving an email from somebody called Uncle Henry from UK, and they said, "Dear Aniket, you had a relative in the UK who just passed away and has left you £250,000. And I was so happy to see that email. I remember taking a printout of that email, rushing out at my home and telling my father that, hey, see, we've got this uncle in the UK. Now, my father is from a complete non-computer, non-technical background. He is an electrical engineer. But even then, 20 years ago, he had a very strong cyber sense. And he says, hey, if something like this is happening, it's too good to be true. Don't fall for it. I'm sure it's a fake email. And I think that's the kind of cyber sense that people really need to develop these days. And I believe that a lot of our programs, our courses, our lectures and projects, somewhere they contribute in developing that kind of a sense. What do you think?
Of course. I agree with you. You know, you and I joke oftentimes about some of the movies and things that we're watching, and we call that the spidey sense, right? That spidey sense is tingling, giving us that kind of moment of pause, right? Really asking ourselves, hey, is this authentic? Is it genuine? And now it's so important. You know, we're used to moving at a speed of light. We want information and access quickly, right? We want to make these quick transactions and all of this stuff. And that's what the cyber criminals are banking on. But we really need to pause, right? And that pause allows us to ask ourselves, is this authentic? Is that email that you received 20 years ago, is it true? Is it genuine? And you did the most important thing before taking an action. You verified, you confirmed. You said, hey, Dad, do I have an Uncle Henry? Do you have an Uncle Henry, a brother, right? In the UK that has left us this inheritance, right?
Right.
And he says, no, Aniket, I'm sorry. Not true, right? Not true. Now, fast forward 20 years, you know, to where we are today, 2025. We still need to ask ourselves that same question, whether it's an email, whether it's a text message, and most importantly, when we're on these social media platforms. The cyber criminals use these great images of very attractive people, cool people, and we need to pause and say, hey, is this authentic? Is it true? Is it genuine?
Right.
And oftentimes that pause will save us the heartache, you know, the pain of falling victim to these frauds, to these crimes. Now, the FBI crime report talked about the types of money, you know, billions of dollars that is lost annually to these type of crimes, the impersonation, the social engineering. And once you submit your credentials, right, the credentials may be your banking information, your name, your address, your PII, all of that sensitive information, it's very difficult to trace that stuff back and pull back, claw back the money that you've given, right? People are oftentimes embarrassed and ashamed, and they just don't report. So what we do, you know, and you and I talk about this often, is we share these best practices with our families, our friends, you know, the seniors, older family members in our, you know, in our lives about the types of fraud that we're seeing. Again, smishing, right? The text messages that are malicious. The phone calls now, right? You and I were talking about a scattered spider, a threat actor that's calling the help desk, right? And preying on these business processes and procedures.
All the time.
All the time. Trying to get people to take these unsafe actions. Now, human nature is that, hey, I want to do my job. I want to reply. I want to solve that problem that Aniket has. But again, we have to pause and ask, is it authentic? Now, we talk about security controls being in place to define and help us sort through that. And that's important. Security controls are the, you know, best practices, the guides, the technological or administrative solutions that may be in play. But oftentimes when we're dealing with our family and friends, you know, we need to rely on that spidey sense. We need to think about Aniket's analogy 20 years ago, stopping, going home, asking Dad, hey, Dad, you got this uncle? And his dad said, no, Aniket. No, we don't. Sorry.
Too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Too good to be true. You've got to go to school. You got to roll up your sleeves and you got to make your money honestly.
That's absolutely
the long and short of it. Great story, Aniket. Very cool.
Thank you. Dr. Byrd, what are the 3 ways everyone can develop and sharpen their cyber sense? What do you feel?
Yeah, I believe the first one is education, right? Meaning that, hey, you need to continue to educate yourself on the
Yeah.
threat landscape. Like, hey,
Yeah.
what are the cyber criminals doing, right? And
Right.
you need to ask yourself, hey, what is it that I need to be doing to prevent myself from falling victim to this type of
Yeah.
fraud? You know,
Yeah.
and that's really what you need to do, phase one. So when I read the cybersecurity advisory notices and things like that, I'm asking myself the question, so what?
Hmm.
So what does that mean to me? So what
Yeah.
does it mean to my family? What does it mean to my organization, right?
Yes. Yes.
Then in that inflection point, I'm asking myself, what is it that I need to do? Or
Yes.
what is it that I need to refrain from doing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the refrain from doing may be, hey, I need to refrain from just going through my emails so quickly, right? Without asking myself very important questions.
Yeah.
Should I be receiving this email? Is this email important to me within
Yeah.
my role and responsibility? And I do that before I even interact with the email.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't pass that kind of spidey sense, kind of questioning, then I avoid it, right? That's my detection and avoiding. So I'm
Correct.
asking myself, hey, if I'm not in payment and acquisition and I receive an email that says urgent, gotta pay this bill, click this link,
Yeah.
update your payment information, open
Yep.
this attachment, right?
Yes.
Then I need to pause and say, hey, this does not relate to my role and responsibility, so I'm going to avoid it.
Right.
We encourage people not to be curious. If it
Right.
does not pertain to you, then avoid it.
Yes.
One of the other scams that, we hear about are the CEO scams, where people get these text messages and email that happens to be or claim to be from their CEO.
Yes.
And you have to ask yourself honestly, humbly, would my CEO contact me via text message or, email or whatever the case may be, a phone call?
Yeah.
And most likely that answer is no. So
Absolutely.
you know that
Yeah.
you can avoid that, threat. So those are things that I do, when I'm honing my skills, right? That's one of the things that I'm doing. And the second thing,
In fact,
is
for one of them, I have something
yeah,
to share as well.
sure.
Recently, I was one company in Bangalore had reached out to me. They had seen something similar where their CEO was impersonated. Employees received an email, and their chief financial officer made a payment, a big payment, and later
Ugh.
on it turned out to be a hoax email.
Right,
Now,
right.
then I helped them to decide a policy. And the policy said, whenever there is any CEO communication that has to happen, it will never come directly from him. It would always be from his executive assistant. And only that person will reach out to you on WhatsApp or a call or an email. If you receive any direct communication from the CEO, assume that to be hoax. And
Perfect.
because of that, it makes it so simple for everyone to remember that CEO is not going to call me directly ever. And
That's
I think
perfect.
that's really helping people.
But you said something interesting, Aniket, and part of the career choices you guys may have in cybersecurity could be policy and governance, right, within
Yes.
that organization, where your
Yes.
role and responsibility is to develop policy. Policy
Yes.
are the rules and regulations for the organization, and that may be you only use your official email for official business, right?
Right.
And you don't
Right.
use these off-channel comms and things like that for, official business. So once that policy is written and signed off by various stakeholders within the organization, legal, HR, compliance, and risk, then that is compiled in some kind of training, whether that be the code of ethics training, your security awareness training, your terms of use, right, training,
Right.
and then
Right.
that's mass distributed throughout your organization, right? And
So
you can
true.
do that on an annual basis. You can do that on a quarterly basis, whatever the cadence may be as defined by your organization. But that
Yes.
needs to happen, right? The rules of the road, the guardrails of not only how to use technology, but what good behavior looks like. It's so important.
And what is bad behavior? What will be
Bad
punished?
Exactly. what's bad behavior, right? The
Right.
risk and stuff like that is just so high nowadays, right? So
Right.
when you start your new job, you just really need to understand, hey, you get these cool laptops, they give you maybe a smartphone or tablet with your role and responsibility, but
Yeah.
that is your organizational technology, not to be
Yes.
used for your own personal use, right?
Absolutely.
You don't
Yeah.
need to be streaming videos. You don't need to be downloading movies and things like that. That is
So
the,
true.
unappropriate, inappropriate use of technology. And that's usually outlined in your, code of ethics and those best practices, policy documents for your
Yeah.
organization. Because if you do introduce those risks and threats to
Hmm.
your organization, then that has financial, regulatory, all of these
It goes
consequences.
everywhere.
It goes everywhere. It just cascades. So
So true.
some of those security controls that you'll hear us talk about through our courses are the security awareness training, the development of policies and
Yeah.
procedures, and there may be some technological controls like you put in to prevent and block not only from the smartphones and tablets using MDMs, mobile
Yeah.
device management tools, but tools like Zscaler to block websites and access to streaming services and things like that. So that's that
So
full
true.
circle of evolution of controls and best practices, revolving and responding to threats, right?
So true. So true. Now coming back to those 3 points. Now, if you can give me a quick summary, I know the first point you said keep reading, and then
Keep reading.
you also
Yeah.
yes,
Keep reading. And then, continuing to reading manifests itself a lot of different ways, right?
yes,
So you're reading
yes,
from the threat landscape standpoint.
right,
I'm reading from a technology standpoint,
right,
understanding that, hey, what is my goal? What is my organization's goal and mission and strategy, right?
so
What are
true,
they
yeah,
interested to grow? And then you educate yourself on the technologies that not only your organization currently has, but maybe future leaning, right? Because
yeah,
people
yeah,
are asking us in the technology in the cyberspace to solve problems, right? And
so true,
oftentimes we may not have these solutions in house. So you may
yes,
say, hey, we have controls to resolve or to mitigate this threat, but we
yeah,
may be required to do something else, right? Add on another piece to that, right? And that may be some networking security control tools or something like that, some of the EDR kind of
yeah,
platforms, maybe isolation tools,
so
something,
true,
like that. So you need to really educate yourself on, hey, what the next generation technology looks like in this space. AI is the perfect example. People
yeah,
are all on the bandwagon looking for AI to solve all types of problems.
yes, yes,
As a technologist, as a cyber professional, you should be asking yourself, hey, so what, right? Where does
hmm.
the data go once I log into this, AI platform? Whether it's
Right,
ChatGPT, whether it's Copilot, you name it. Ask
right,
yourself, hey, what are the data privacy and security risks associated with that?
so
How
true,
often are the language models updated? How are the data trained? And, all of those type of things are those so what questions, the deep dive questions that as a cyber professional, as a technologist, people will be looking for you to solve
yeah,
and answer. So you always are educating yourself, you know, about what's new and important. And doing that deep dive, rolling up your sleeve, is so important. That's why having this ongoing inquisitive nature is really important. The
so true,
technology, the education you learn today, is so different. When Aniket and I went to school 20 some years ago,
yes,
it's just different. So you
it's very
have to
different,
have to continually educate yourself on a plethora of things, not only from the threat landscape, what are the bad guys doing,
yeah,
from, hey,
yeah,
what's new and innovative from a technology standpoint. And then, throughout the course, you hear me talking about the NIST and some of these standard organizations,
yes,
understanding, hey, what are other people in the industry thinking about? What are some of the concerns they have? And how are they solving those problems? You don't solve or grow in a silo, right? So you have to reach out to different groups and business components in your organization and outside of your organization as well.
True, very true. I think you have to read. You have to read the technology. You have to read about the threat landscape. You talked about going deep diving into what is the technology today and what can come tomorrow. A friend of mine works in a global capability center and works in cybersecurity department. They did not have a lot of AI usage till now, but last week they said they got a big order for agentic AI security. And over the next 1 week, everybody is expected to be experts on agentic AI. So there have been some who have seen this coming and they have been upskilling themselves, and they are the ones who got the advantage during that point. So keeping yourself abreast is very important. Here is what I do for some of these things, and I completely agree with you. I read the news, I read the articles. I also listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm walking. I like to marry my goals. I like to marry my fitness goals and my education goals. So when I'm working out or I'm walking, at that time I'm listening to a podcast, and at that time also making mental notes that, hey, what would I and Dr. Byrd discuss about this? What can we do next on this? This is a very interesting area. Now, the next phase comes when you actually talk about it to somebody. So over dinner, I discuss this with my daughter and my wife. I, in fact, inform my parents as well that, hey, there is this new scam going on. So if you get this kind of a call and you need to be on the lookout for these kind of signs, and if it's happening to you or your friends, then you need to share this thing with them. And you know what? This motivates them a lot, because in their 60s and 70s group, they are the cyber folks. My parents keep talking about cybersecurity to their friends and keep telling them that, hey, my son told me that this is happening, be on the lookout for this. So
that's great.
People are motivated for this.
That's it. And you hit the nail on the head, Aniket. You know, we are in this really sweet spot. You know, we have our children, the younger generation behind us that was born into the technology, right? At birth, they had all of these toys and tools that were connected to the internet, right? So they are very comfortable with that. We have our parents and the other generation on the other side of us, right? That was not, born into technology like that, right? They are used to radio and television, and these scams prey on them, right? They look to take advantage of people that are, unsuspecting, When we talk about the FBI crime reports, the stats, unfortunately, you talk about elder and senior fraud. It's just heartening, disheartening to hear about all of the type of things that people prey and take advantage of this generation. And it's our responsibility to make sure we educate and inform them on how to stay safe. I tell the seniors in my family, hey, make sure you talk to me or talk to other family members before taking an action. Have a safe friend, right, that you can talk to about, hey, I'm getting these text messages, or I'm getting a phone call that claims to be from this agency or this department. Is this true? Right. And sometimes when you get two minds together, you can say, nah, that's fraud. That's fraud. Stay away. But you have to, we call it each one teach one, reach out to your communities. And as Aniket are saying on both sides, we're bookend. We've got our families and, aunts and uncles and parents that are 70s and 80s, right? And then we had a younger generation of kids that are new and into gaming and all of that stuff. But it's also important to have conversations with that younger generation, right?
Right.
And having the conversation that we talked about the other day, authenticity, right? Is an individual true, and are they who they say they are? And don't overshare, right, on these social media platforms. When I talk to younger students and young people, I say, what you put on the internet today stays out there forever.
Forever, yes.
Forever. So if you're, young person putting stuff out there, you just have to be careful not to overshare. Right. So there's great stories I tell young college students when they go on spring break.
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
So
right.
True.
Be
true.
cautious of that. Right.
All right, Dr. Byrd, I think that's about it in our first episode. I think, I had a great experience speaking here, and I would
Always,
look
Eric.
forward to our next episode, right?
Aniket, it's always a pleasure, my friend. You know, you and I talk all the time about the things that are happening in our personal lives and friends and family. And I think it's a great idea to share this with a broader, international audience, man. As always, it's a pleasure, Aniket, man. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Byrd. And as we heard from Dr. Byrd, each one teach one. If you like this podcast, share this with your friend so that you also follow each one teach one. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot for tuning in to the first episode of this podcast. It was fantastic having you listen to our first episode, and we would be pumped up to see you again in the next episode. Until then, each one teach one. Thank you.